Hello class, hope you all are doing well and welcome to week 3. I wanted to go over the week 3 assignment as this is a particular assignment that I find many students struggle with, especially if you don't have any kind of experience in the classroom or instructing. So I wanted to provide further guidance in hopes of helping you better understand the assignment, and I will also go over an exemplar that I will then attach to the announcement so that you can look over it as well. So just to kind of recap, we started in week 1. We're using the backward design model, and in that process we need to first determine what our standard is and develop our learning objectives. So in week 1, you created your standard, you developed your 3 measurable learning objectives. Hopefully you've already reviewed that feedback and made any kind of changes that you needed to before you moved on to your week 2 assignment, which was the next step of the backward design model, and that is to create your assessments. We focused week 2 just on the formative assessments, and now in week 3 we're going to be creating the summative assessments. So remember, formative assessments happen during instruction, and then your summative assessments typically happen at the end of a unit that you're teaching so that you can determine if students have actually mastered the learning objectives that you have created for your unit plan. And then the next step in the backward design model is actually creating the lesson plan or lesson plans for your unit, but we will not get there in this course. So for your week 3 assignment, you're going to be creating your summative assessment based on the standard and the learning objectives that you created in week 1. So to prepare, make sure you've read 6, 7, and 8 in your text. Be sure to review this link that walks you through the process of creating and using rubrics. Creating rubrics is an area that many students do struggle with. Like I said, if you definitely if you don't have that experience, but in general, writing rubrics are just a challenge for teachers all around. They're just very complex, and they have a lot of moving parts. So be sure to watch this video to help further guide you. Be sure that you're downloading the template to help you as you write your assignment. You're going to make sure that you need to go to the Ashford Library and find a scholarly article about the benefits and challenges of using performance-based assessments. And then you can choose one of these links. They will actually help you or walk you through the process of generating a rubric for you that I'll talk about a little bit later. So I wanted to kind of go over the week 3 assignment in detail. There are 2 parts to it. The first part is actually creating that summative assessment. So you're going to start with a test blueprint, which I will go over when I explain the template. But all you're going to do is create 10 different test questions. Now, they're broken down into specific types of test questions. So the first is you're going to create 6 items that must be selected responses. And if you go to tables 8.4, 8.5, and 8.6 of your text, that will provide you some guidance on how to create those selected responses. Now, of the 6 selected response questions, 1 must be a multiple choice, 1 must be matching, and 1 must be true or false. The other 3, I don't care what they are. They can, rest of them could be all selected response if you want. But again, of the 6, 1 has to be multiple choice, 1 matching, and 1 true or false. Then this actually should say 3. You should have 3 test items that are short answer constructed responses. See chapter 8.5 for further guidance on how to create those. Then you're going to create 1 test item, just 1, that's a performance-based assessment. So these are test items. They're going to probably be more lengthy, and again, I'll provide you an example, but they might be a presentation, a performance, project, debate, or a report. So this is something that we will need a rubric in order to assess. So for your performance-based assessment, you are only creating a rubric for that particular test question. I've had students in the past try to create a rubric for the selected response and the constructed responses, and we don't need a rubric for that because there essentially is just one right answer. With your performance-based assessments, students are going to have different projects and different ideas or presentations, but that's why we create a rubric aligned with the learning objectives to make sure that no matter what the students are doing, they are still showing how they're meeting the learning objectives. You do want to make sure that your test items reflect a testing blueprint. So we want to make sure there is that alignment, and not only to the objective, but to the Bloom's taxonomy that you've selected for each learning objective. And then, like I said, you're going to be creating that analytic rubric for your performance-based assessment. It has to have 4 levels of performance for the rating scale, at least 4 different criteria that are aligned to the learning objectives and assignment, and then clear performance level descriptions for each criterion based on the rating scale. And again, I'll go over that in more detail in just a moment. Then there's part 2 of your week 3 assignment. All you're going to do there is you're going to describe the advantages and limitations of using selected response and constructed response assessments. Be sure that you're using evidence from your readings to support your analysis. So I should see citations from what you've read to support that analysis. Again, just be sure that you're not relying on direct quotes. They should be used sparingly, and instead you should be working to paraphrase those ideas that you've read. The second part is discussing the main requirements of a good performance-based assessment, and then relate those requirements to the one you created. So after you've discussed what those main requirements are, look at your performance-based assessment and does it align to what those main requirements are. And then what are the benefits and challenges of using performance-based assessment? That's where you're, when you needed to prepare, you're going to use your scholarly article to support that analysis as well as your readings. And then also consider the challenges of using rubrics to assess student work. And one thing that's really challenging with rubrics is that sometimes they tend to be subjective, which means that if you and I were using the same rubric to assess student work, based on our own opinions, we might say that one student performed proficient in one area where I might say it's developing. So that's why your descriptors in your rubric have to be really clear to help minimize that subjectivity. And then you're going to conclude with your experience in this whole process of writing a summative assessment. What did you find most challenging? What was helpful for you in creating this summative assessment? Just be sure to elaborate on those thoughts, because I actually use this part as a formative way to assess the process to see what students were struggling with and what I might need to do in the future to better support students as they complete this assignment. And then just be sure to look over the writing and formatting expectations. It must be an 8 to 10 page double-spaced paper, and that does not include your title and reference page. Also, be sure the Writing Center is a wonderful place that has oodles and oodles of resources for you to support your writing. One is the Introduction and Conclusions that provides you a step-by-step process of how to really write solid introductions and conclusions, making sure that in your introduction you have a clear thesis statement. If you haven't already uploaded Grammarly, I really suggest that you do that. I use it all the time, and it's a great way to just have additional eyes on my work to make sure that I'm submitting something that is error-free. Again, in part 2 especially, I should see the integration of the readings and that one scholarly source to support your analysis. Here's a great link from the Writing Center about how to integrate your research, your research successfully, and then how to find other scholarly sources. You should be going to the Ashford Library to do that. And then I know APA tends to be a lot of students' main nemesis, but again, the Writing Center has just done a really great job of providing you the resources that you need to support you. So just be sure that you're reviewing that information as well. So I'm going to go over the the blueprint with specific examples or an exemplar in the process. So just again, be sure that you're deleting all of the green boxes after you've included the information. You're going to write your brief introduction with your thesis statement. So the very first thing you're going to do, remember in week 1, you selected a standard. You're going to copy and paste your standard here. Then you're going to take your 3 learning objectives and copy and paste them right in here in the test blueprint. Then list the Bloom's taxonomy that you classified each of your learning objectives to. And then you're going to determine how many questions you're going to have in your test for each that is aligned to each learning objective. But the total amount of questions should only be 10. So I've decided I'm going to do 5 on the tools, 4 on clouds, and 1 on cold and warm fronts. And then your percentage of weight obviously should be 100. So I just assume that each question is worth 10. And so that weight brings me to that 100%. So then what I did is said, okay, I've got 5 items. So I copied and pasted the first objective 5 times. So here's question 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And you'll see 6 is the next one. So I copied and pasted that 5 times because I knew that's what I wanted. And then, let's see. So then I went under the Bloom's taxonomy classification, and I just copied and pasted that each one of these was understanding. So then I knew I needed to create 3 constructed responses and 6 selected. So here's and I just put a 1 next to it just to kind of keep me on track and ensuring that I meet all the criteria. So the first one, it's about explaining the purposes. So here is my question, and then I've provided the answer. This is a constructed response because students have to provide me the answer. Then here's my first selected response. I knew that I needed to create 6, but one of them had to be multiple choice, 1 matching, and 1 true or false. So I wanted to make sure that I captured that as well. So again, these notes are for me to ensure that I'm, again, meeting their criteria. You can include this part right here if you want. I would suggest it just to make sure that you're on the right track. So this one was going to be multiple choice, and I just highlighted what the answer was. And then question 3 is matching, and it looks like after I had done this, it got a little wonky on me. Let's see. So you just get the gist of it. I think when I copied and pasted the standard in, it messed with my formatting. So let's see, this measures temperature. Let's see. Okay, so this one just needs to be here. That measures direction. And we're missing my weather vane. That's what it is. We're going to scoot this down. Let's do this. Just scoot this up. Let's see if it brings up. So you're just going to have to play with this as well when you're doing it to make sure that it stays where it needs to stay. Okay, so I'm actually going to change this. This is a weather vane, measures wind direction. And then there should be another line that goes from here to here. But here's a matching one, for example. And then I knew I needed to have another true and false. I had to have a true and false. So I've got my 3 selected response already. And I created a true or false question and again highlighted it. And then I decided to create another constructed response for this one. And so you can kind of walk through each one yourself. And then now I'm moving on to my next learning objective, and that I had 4 test items. So I'm going to copy and paste that learning objective 4 times. So you'll see here it is. I knew now I'm on my 4th selected response, and I decided to include images as well for the question. So you can kind of run through each one on your own to kind of see the examples that I've made. And then the last one is I decided to make my performance-based assessment. So this one, students are actually going to be doing a presentation, and you can see how a performance-based assessment tends to be a bit more lengthy, because consider when you were in school and you had a project to do, the teacher probably had step-by-step instructions on what you needed to do. So for this particular performance-based assessment, I'm going to have the students become meteorologists and present their forecast. So it kind of, even though I just said it aligned to this learning objective, it actually aligns with all 3, because they'll be talking about weather tools as well as the different clouds. So potentially I could copy and paste all 3 learning objectives here. But you can walk through and see what the performance-based assessment is. And then here is my rubric. So like I said, you needed to have 4 different levels for your rating scale. I decided to use beginning, developing, proficient, and distinguished. Some people use numbers. There's other words as well. If you have younger students, you might use words that are a bit more appropriate for their understanding. Then you need to have 4 different criteria, and you should be able to pull that from your assignment, but we also want to make sure that it aligns with our rubric. Our learning objectives. Describes the purpose of each weather tool, identifies the different clouds, explains the impact of cold and warm fronts on weather, and then I included presentation skills. And then here are your descriptors. So basically what I should see is a clear difference between what someone at the beginning level looks like, developing, proficient, and then distinguished. So you can review that and see how things change. Again, be sure to review that video and description in the preparation part of week 3 about rubrics. That should help you, but this is what essentially I should see. And then as you scroll down, here is where this is part 2, where you're discussing the advantages and limitations of the selected response and constructed response assessments, and the requirements of a good performance-based assessment, followed by your conclusion, and then your references. So hopefully this provides you with the guidance that you need. If you have any questions, just let me know. And again, this exemplar will be posted in the announcement as well. Just reach out to me if you need anything, and hope you guys are having a good one.